Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Suds, Snacks, and Socialism Virtual Forum. Today's topic is Election 2022. What does it mean for the socialist left? We want to dedicate this forum to the memory of Michael Rubin. And I'm going to ask Jack Gerson to say a few words in Michael's memory and honor.
Okay, I'm going to say a few words, and I hope others will have something to say at some point today or in some other way, because really many of you have worked more with Mike in recent years than I have in the Bay Area Eco-Socialist group and in the Green Party, especially. So I met Mike in 1968, in the summer of 1968, for the first time in the Peace and Freedom Party in San Francisco. And at the time, Mike would be standing by the door at every meeting, holding up a copy of the Independent Socialist, which was the publication of his organization, the Independent Socialist Clubs. Eventually, Mike was there in a left which had a number of extremely flamboyant characters. Mike was not flamboyant, but Mike was always there. And through the decades, Mike was always there. He was steadfast year after year, decade after decade. But more than being there, Mike was principled, and he stuck to his principles, and he was willing to fight for them. And what were those principles? Well, I believe, and now he and I did not share completely politics, but I believe that we could summarize Mike's politics as this. First is socialism from below, and combined with that third camp, socialism, believing that capitalism and the countries that were called socialist were class societies, in which the working class was not the ruling class, but was rather oppressed and exploited by a ruling class that controlled society, production, the social surplus, and so on. He also had the principle of what is called the rank and file approach to labor, which I'm not going to try to define. His comrades, from Solidarity, have definitions of it. Kim Moody's written about that. Third, opposition to both capitalist parties. Mike was especially strong on opposition to the Democratic Party when a number of people in his group Solidarity went into DSA and gave some form of support to Democratic politicians. Mike would not oppose that. And along with that was support for independent political action. First, in the Peace and Freedom Party from the 1960s onward for some time, and after that, the Green Party. Finally, eco-socialism. Mike was one of the early proponents of eco-socialism and active in it all the way through to his last days, as well as support for struggles of the oppressed, the various struggles of oppressed and exploited people of all kinds. Now, I just want to add to this that Mike had the courage of his convictions. Mike was not known as a polished speaker or a prolific writer, but Mike was willing to stand up and put himself forward. I recall, for example, this would have been in the 1980s during one of the presidential campaigns, I think 1988, and Mike debated Peter Camejo. Now, it would ordinarily take a very courageous or foolish person to be debating Camejo, regardless of whether or not you agreed with him. Mike was willing to do it without any compunctions whatsoever. Whether or not he won the debate is another question, but Mike was willing to stand up and put his politics forward. He whatever one agreed or disagreed with Mike, you knew where he stood at all times. So I think that that Mike, through the decades, was a model for someone who put forward his beliefs, fought for his beliefs, and did so pretty much ego-free. Did so in a way which showed compassion for those downtrodden in society. So hopefully, from this day forward, we will be able to say Mike Rubin presente.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you very much, Jack. Michael Rubin Presente. So we're going to return to our agenda for the Suds, Snacks, and Socialism Virtual Forum. As I said before, our topic is election 2022. What does it mean for the socialist left? Our speakers today are Howie Hawkins of the Green Party and Gwen McLaughlin of San Francisco DSA. This forum series is a cooperative effort of the Alameda County Peace and Freedom Party, the Bay Area System Change, Not Climate Change, and the Oakland Greens. I'm Marsha Feinland, and I'm your moderator today. We'll be starting with an initial presentation by the speakers. Following that, it will be your turn to ask questions and make statements. You can find the chat and reactions icons at the bottom of your screen, at least most of you. Some people have different kinds of screens. You can signify that you want to be on the stack to speak by using the hand raising feature under reactions. You can also use the chat to communicate to the group. We welcome your various political opinions. We do not allow personal attacks on individuals. In other words, feel free to express your opinion. Please don't call anyone else names just because you disagree with them. We're going to start with Howie Hawkins. Howie is co-founder of the Green Party in the United States and was the party's presidential candidate in 2020. I see that Howie has a Howie Hawkins for Governor banner behind him. He was the first candidate when he ran for governor in 2010. He was the first candidate to run on a fully developed Green New Deal platform, which is quite different than the Green New Deal being proposed in Congress. He's a retired Teamster, and he's been active in movements for civil rights, peace, labor, and the environment since the late 1960s. He's currently active with the Green Socialist Organizing Project. Before Howie starts, I see a hand up. Please, it's not time to raise your hand yet. Please wait until after both speakers speak. Thank you. Go ahead, Howie. Howie, you're muted.
Thank you, Marsha. I'd first like to say a few words about Michael Rubin. You mentioned the Green Socialist Organizing Project. He was helping us organize that. And I didn't meet him, I think, until the 21st century through Solidarity and the Green Party. But I think he may have influenced me because coming up in the Bay Area in the late 60s in high school, one of the groups that had a lot of influence on me was the Independent Socialist Clubs. I may have even got a leaflet or a newsletter from Michael, but I didn't know who he was. And then in recent years in the Green Party, we worked together, really trying to maintain the position of independent political action, pushing an eco-socialist Green New Deal, which has now been adopted into the Green Party platform, and then organizing this Green Socialist Organizing Project, which is trying to pursue that work. And, I'm just going to miss his wisdom and advice and solidarity. So I was sorry to see that he passed. So on the topic today, what does the midterm elections mean for the socialist left? I'm going to try to cover 4 points. And one of them is that I think one result is that the two corporate party system keeps moving to the right. Provide some evidence for that. Second point is that creates an even bigger vacuum for the independent socialist left. The question, of course, is how do we fulfill it? And one of the barriers to us, this is the third point, is the winner-take-all single-member district electoral system, which creates a spoiler problem and gerrymandering, and we've got to deal with that. So I think that's coming out of this election, one of the things we need to emphasize. And the other thing I think is that the independent socialist left needs to really push peace policies onto the public agenda because they're just not being discussed. And, the military budget grows. We have controversy over Ukraine. I'll mention that at the end, but those are the 4 points I'm going to try to cover. So I I think the two-party corporate system keeps moving to the right because the Democrats keep chasing the Republicans to the right. I mean, they really lucked out, I think, in this election because of the abortion issue. And that was unpopular with people. We see that from the referendums that states had, and that probably, kept the losses in the House and enabled them to keep the Senate. And in some elections, like in Arizona, the question of democracy and election denial probably got the Democrats over the top there in the governor's race. But otherwise, the Democrats were chasing the Republicans to the right. They took people of color for granted and appealed to the swing voters in the suburbs, but above all to their corporate wealthy donors. So the Republicans would do racist fear-mongering around crime, and the Democrats answered with, we're going to spend more money on police instead of crime prevention through anti-poverty and economic security programs. And they totally avoided the criminal justice reforms that were so big in 2020 with the protests after George Floyd's murder. The Republicans did racist fear-mongering around the immigration question. And the Democrats basically accepted that narrative. They treated it as a security issue, less as a humanitarian crisis, and continued Trump-era policies on asylum bans, ramped up prosecutions, and expedited deportations. Right at the moment, the Biden administration is figuring out how they can continue the high level of deportations that were enabled by Title 42, which allowed immediate deportation because of the COVID crisis. That may get knocked down in the Supreme Court, but the Biden administration is figuring out how they can keep deporting people if Title 42 is thrown out. And then the Republicans are whining about freedom, COVID mandates, public health measures, such as vaccination and mask mandates. And the Democrats didn't resist that. They echoed the Republicans, and they withdrew their support for mask mandates in schools and public transportation and vaccine mandates for teachers and public-facing public employees. And that included, my governor in New York, Hochul, Phil Murphy in New Jersey, Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. And then in the National Defense Authorization Act, they acquiesced to the Republican demand that they stop giving or requiring COVID vaccines for members of the armed forces. So they just retreat and try to adapt to what the Republicans are doing instead of fighting them. And so we have a Republican Party now that is the most extremist, unpopular party in the history of American major party politics. When you look at the policies that they advocate, just one indicator of that, 70% of the Republican House members and all of their caucus leaders now with McCarthy elected are election deniers. The Democrats should be able to crush them in elections, but the Democrats won't push popular economic class issues like raising the minimum wage, restoring the expanded child tax credit, Medicare for all, taxing the rich. You can go on and on. That's because the Democrats answer to their corporate donors, not their base voters, who a lot of them then stay home because they're not enthused. And so the Republicans' racist scapegoating in the culture wars around crime and immigration and public health and the elections, whether they're fair or not, they set the terms of debate and they put it on their terrain. So there's a lot more, I have a lot more notes on that point, but I think I got to skip them to keep it within 20 minutes. But the next point is, this creates a political vacuum for the independent socialist left. And the polls show on these issues on class and social justice issues that, the demands we raise, the reforms we propose, have majoritarian support. I mean, in a lot of cases, it's over 70%. But we've got a Republican Party. It's no longer just a traditional conservative party. They've become an extremist, far-right party that's fascistic. It wants to maintain white supremacy through authoritarian rule with barely the facade of democracy. And the corporate leadership in the Democratic Party, led by Biden, still wants bipartisanship with the party that tried to overthrow Biden's election. it's kind of astonishing. And there are progressives in the Democratic Party. They're a small minority. They make the Democrats look better than they are, but they really have no leverage. So the problem for independent progressives and socialists is that because the Republicans are extremists, most progressive-minded voters feel compelled to vote for the Democrats as the lesser evil to stop the Republicans. Which is why I would say that one of the issues that we've really got to emphasize going forward are electoral reforms, pro-democracy reforms to create an inclusive multi-party democracy. And one thing we need to do, because the Democrats didn't do it, is take leadership in the fight for voting rights and honest elections. You know, they have majorities in both houses of Congress, and because they wouldn't take on the filibuster that gave the Republicans the veto, those reforms were not passed. The Democrats didn't get it done because they accommodate the Republicans instead of fighting them. So we have to go, well, then the next thing is we got to, you know, get involved in this movement for ranked choice voting and proportional representation, because that will uproot the spoiler problem and the gerrymandering problem, which is rooted in single member district winner take all elections. Of course, that means ranked choice voting for single seat executive offices, but it also means, and this is what the left needs to emphasize, proportional ranked choice voting in multi-seat districts to create proportional representation in our legislative bodies, from city councils to the House. Ranked choice voting eliminates the spoiler problem and that open space for the left. And it also eliminates the possibility for partisan and racial gerrymandering, because in a proportional representation election, every political and ethnic interest can get their proportional share of representation no matter how the district lines are drawn. We've had a lot of talk about independent redistricting commissions. You had it in California. And you know, what was the result? Only 5 of the 52 House districts were competitive, defined as a 5% or less spread between the two candidates. So we can have independent redistricting commissions and remove obvious partisan gerrymandering, but still most of our districts are going to be non-competitive districts. 95% of state legislative districts and well over 90% of House districts are not competitive. Those elections are farcical. We know who's going to win before they're even conducted. So one thing that proportional ranked choice voting does is makes elections competitive and gives the independent left the opportunity to get representation in proportion to its support among the voters. So these reforms enable the progressive-minded voters to vote for who they want without worrying about helping the candidates they fear the most. And another point I would make in this regard is that while even in elections that are non-competitive, the perception is among progressive-minded people, they got to vote for the Democrats to stop the Republicans, even though the election's not competitive. But we can get in those elections, district elections for state legislature, House, city councils, that are not competitive. And because the major party that's the minor party in that district doesn't run serious campaigns, we can often come in at least second to begin with and set the debate. And a lot of times these campaigns, you know, well, I talked about, you know, what they did talk about with the Democrats tailing the Republicans and letting the Republicans set the agenda. I think we can make a big difference. And combining that with street politics, I think we can really change the terms of debate and also give that progressive majority on many issues the belief that it can make a difference, because right now people think it's hopeless. Another issue with regard to electoral reform that we got to worry about is ranked choice voting is being linked to top 4 or top 5 primaries. I know you got top 2 in California. And these primaries not only knock out independent left candidates before the general election, they destroy parties themselves, their ability to nominate their own candidates. I mean, even if a party, I know Peace and Freedom And the Greens in California have had this experience. You can designate a candidate that the party organization wants to run, but all you got, another member of the party can just do a filing fee, get on a ballot, and then your rank and file voters show up and they don't know who the party's supporting. They're confused. It takes away the nomination from the party members and hands it over to this process where the candidates that get attention are those that got a lot of money and can advertise. So it furthers the atomization of the electorate. So people are not talking to each other through parties, at least those that want to be politically active. All they're getting is messages from the rich candidates. And of course, those messages on TV are pretty vacuous and negative. So I think, our position should be ranked choice voting, yes, but no to top 2, 4, or 5 primaries. So the last point I'll make on the electoral reform issues is that this is an issue we're winning. We went into the 2020 election with ranked choice voting in about 24 jurisdictions around the country. And we're coming out of the 2022 election with ranked choice voting either implemented or on the way, like in Nevada, in over 100 jurisdictions. So we've been winning, and the left should be in the middle of this movement. And I think, as I said before, the position we should emphasize is that when it comes to legislative elections, we want proportional ranked choice voting, ranking candidates in multi-seat districts so we get proportional representation in legislatures. If we just settle for ranked choice voting in single member districts, we still have a winner-take-all system where the majority party in that district is going to get reelected. I'll give you an example in Australia. The Greens there are a 12% party. And in the House, where there are 150 seats, they have single seat ranked choice voting. And the Greens only have 4 of 151 seats. In the Senate, where they have districts that have proportional multi-seat districts with ranked choice voting, the Greens have, I guess, 9 out of 63 or something like that, anywhere close to their 12% of their vote. So that's why I'm saying ranked choice voting for legislative bodies from single seat districts is not going to make very much change. The game changer is proportional ranked choice voting. So I think that should be an emphasis for the left. And then finally, in the 22 elections, there was, again, no debate and no challenge to U.S. foreign and military policy, let alone, a left program that people knew about for peace. There was no questioning of the ballooning military budget, no opposition to the nuclear weapons modernization program, which has kicked off a new nuclear arms race, no demands to pursue negotiations to reestablish arms control treaties that the U.S. unilaterally withdrew from, like the ABM and Intermediate Anti-Ballistic Missile and Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaties, Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. And, there's a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons to which 91 countries have signed on to. And there's been no push in this country to get the United States to take initiatives to bring in all the nuclear powers, which aren't part of this treaty, into it. There are demands that we could have raised, like at this time, like cutting off aid to Israel as it openly says it's going to annex Palestinian land. The priority demand of the Palestinian National PDS Committee is to cut off military aid to Israel. Unconditional support for Israel is declining in US public opinion, and now's a good time for the socialist left to move that opinion and Congress as the most extremely right-wing racist government in Israeli history comes to power. Another thing is cutting the aid to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates to end the war in Yemen. There was a limited cutoff passed in 2019 for offensive weapons, which was maybe not well implemented. More expansive cuts were voted down in December, but it's going to come back up in 2023. And we're talking about a lot of aid, $55 billion to Saudi Arabia, UAE, and military assistance between 2015 and 2021, and $127 billion in military sales are in the pipeline to Saudi Arabia. And that's far more military assistance than is in the pipeline for Ukraine. So these are the kind of demands we could raise and move, I think, move the ground on. Military aid to Ukraine was not a debate in 2022, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a debate in 2024 because the Republicans are going to make it so. The Republican Party is going to have peace candidates who are going to call for cutting off aid to Ukraine and redirecting those military resources to the Cold War with China and border security with racist dog whistles about Asians and Latinos. And, you know, their policy papers out. There's just one a couple of days ago from Christian Witten, who was a State Department advisor to both George W. Bush and Trump, that laid out what I just described in the National Interest, the magazine, The National Interest. So now the left, we're probably going to get into this discussion, is divided on what to do about Ukraine, with some of them calling it a U.S. proxy war on Russia and calling for a cutoff of support for Ukraine's resistance to the Russian invasion. And I'll just say, I think that approach is wrong. Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine is a colonial war, and Ukrainian resistance is a national liberation struggle. And as socialists, we should support national liberation struggles. And if aid is cut to Ukraine and Ukraine is broken, disarmed, I don't think there's anything to stop Russia then from pursuing its original objective of the complete recolonization of Ukraine. So we should start with what the Ukrainian people want. They want military, economic, and humanitarian aid. And you can get that from the democratic left in Ukraine, the socialists, the anarchists, the feminists, the environmentalists, and the trade unionists. So I just think we need to be consistent anti-imperialists and oppose all imperialism, including Russian imperialism as well as US imperialism. And I think, you know, this is going to be an issue in 2024 because the Republicans are going to make it so. So I think I stayed within my 20 minutes. And
Yes,
thank you.
exactly.
Okay, thank you, Howie. I just want to announce that we do have a third panelist, who will be Aaron Reveles, who was a candidate for school board in Los Angeles County. But next, we're going to go to Gwen McLaughlin. Gwen is a member of the editorial board of San Francisco Democratic Socialists of America, and she was field director for the Yes on M Fill Empty Homes campaign. And she's going to explain to us about the implications of that victory, actually. Go ahead, Gwen.
Hey everyone, thanks for that introduction. Yeah, Gwen, I was the field director on Proposition M, and then I'm on DSA San Francisco's electoral board and probably soon to be steering committee. We'll see what happens at our next chapter meeting and I'll let you guys know. But so I asked some of the panelists and people who showed up a bit earlier what we wanted to get into, and I think I'm just going to give like a very brief summary on what Proposition M is, but I kind of have gone over this before at one of the Suds and Socialism panels, and then I'm going to get more in the weeds and talk to you about share some slides with you all of some of the internal debriefs that we've been doing within the DSA, breaking down some like reports and like numbers and voting return information that we got from how we did in different districts and how that related to the field plan, which I can speak to a lot because I was field director. So yeah, first I'll just get into sorry, one moment. I'm just pulling something up. Just a quick, you know, what is Prop M for you all? You might have read this in the news throughout the election cycle before, but there are 60,000 empty homes in San Francisco. That means 1 in 7 apartments sit vacant. It's a really shocking figure, especially when we have somewhere between 8,000 to 12,000 homeless people in our city. And over the last decade, we've seen tens of thousands of residents who are from working class backgrounds get pushed out of the city because the rent is just an unaffordable place. And as the DSA and myself, we believe that housing is a human right, not an investment opportunity for mega landlords. So basically in the summer of 2020, the chapter voted to do a ballot measure campaign. The chapter historically has helped run other proposition ballot measures within the city. I think most notably, besides Prop M, I really was a huge supporter of the 2018 Prop F, which was the tenants' right to counsel. So we thought we'd do it again. We have a lot of success in our electoral organizing. It's a good way to bring people into the movement as well. And so, yeah, we decided we were going to first just run any ballot measure, and then we ended up honing in and landing on this vacancy tax. And then we partnered with Faith in Action, which is like a interfaith religious organization that also does a lot of organizing around immigration and immigration defense and housing issues in the city and in the Bay Area larger. There's a larger Bay Area chapter as well. And then also Supervisor Dean Preston, who's a DSA candidate. He is the District 5 supervisor in San Francisco. We all sort of started to work on this together to get a vacancy tax passed. It's based on square footage of the unit. So the bigger the unit, the higher the tax. And it would increase yearly as I think capping after 5 years or something like that. And the main effects of this are it was projected to bring 4,500 homes back onto the market. But more importantly, I think to me, because we know the market does not serve justice, it's supposed to generate $38 million annually to be split between the acquisition of affordable housing and rental subsidies for low-income families and seniors. And that was just a cool split too, because Dean's office, Dean Preston, had been really interested in housing acquisition through the city and acquiring unused old hotels or apartment buildings, having the city buy them and convert them to affordable housing, ideally social housing. And then Faith in Action was our other partner they were very concerned with having a direct rental subsidies program come out of this, which I think was also really helpful to securing the victory when talking to voters. So that's just a general, what is Prop M? I might refer to it as the vacancy tax, Prop M, the empty homes tax, all the same thing. Now I'm going to start screen sharing, and you will see how crazy my desktop is. And I'm going to get to this little presentation. Okay, sorry. As you can tell, some of my slides are just full of information. So yeah, this is a slideshow. I edited it slightly for this, but it was like an internal debrief that we were doing after wrapping all this up with the electoral board. We're in the process of making a lot of post reports about how all this went. This is from this photo is from the launch of our signature gathering effort. Oh, right. Another interesting thing about Prop M, it was a citizens initiative. So we got on the ballot through signature gathering, which was, I think, really helpful for us getting a head start, talking to voters much earlier, but also meant that we had full control over the legislation, because if you go through the board, then you have to get a bunch of board members to sign on to it. And yeah, we all know how that goes. So the exciting news is that we won with 54.5%. And it's a pretty radical housing measure. Some people are like more or less excited about it, but I think why I think it has a radical message is we're really targeting this issue of vacancies. And I think that's really helpful for the socialists and the left's cause of really driving home the idea that, there's not a lack in our society, but there is a problem with how things are distributed. And there's plenty of housing to go around in the Bay Area. It's just not going around because it's being controlled by the private marketplace and like corporate greed. So I'm going to talk a little bit why we think we were successful and why we were able to get that number, especially when there were largely, I'm not going to get into it as much because I was very tunnel visioned at this point in time working on Prop M. But if you look at the results of the district supervisor races in San Francisco, along with the city college measure that did not pass, I think there's a lot to say about like seemingly progressive measures or candidates really struggling this cycle. And so I think Prop M sort of like stands out in being something that was much more left and radical on the ballot, but was successful, as opposed to things that were like more milquetoast or more like progressive-y. So we started really early throughout the campaign, one, and just the fact that we were through the signature gathering effort, but we also even started our lit dropping program before we were even given a letter by the city. So we were doing, we were mobilizing every weekend and then also throughout the week. And we did door knocking, lit dropping, text banking, phone banking. We had all bilingual materials. We did a few bilingual phone banks. And also Faith in Action was really crucial in that component of their majority of their membership is Spanish speaking, and they majority live in districts 11, 10, and 9. And those were areas we knew we were able to get in on a poll, actually, which is crazy because those are really expensive. And we found out, we just hopped on someone else's, and we were able to find out that those would be difficult areas for us, important areas for us to win, but difficult to win. And yeah, we also were able to raise enough money to put out some mailers. I'd also say, this is kind of in the weeds. Feel free to tune out of reading all the words on these slides. There's a lot of them. But yeah, our GOTV plan was really flexible. We were really aggressive in our field plan throughout this entire campaign, which also just speaks to like people power over huge amounts of money, because the opposition ended up raising over $1 million and they really just didn't even know what they were doing with it. I'll have a bit later on where I can speak more to that if we get time to do it. But yeah, we were focused on progressive turnout. And it was projected, like it says here, it was looking like we were going to have low voter turnout, but we knew that if we got the voter turnout up to 62%, we'd probably be like in a good spot. So our main thing was driving progressive turnout, focusing on the areas I mentioned, 5, 8, and 9. And we did really aggressive door knocking programs throughout the 4-day run up to the election. And DSA volunteers were extremely vigilant and incredible. Oftentimes, like many of them walked 3 turfs in a day. They just kept coming back. And we realized that to be true of our member volunteers rather than a lot of other just like progressives or even, like some other organizations. Really, like their volunteers were not showing up in the same force. So that was really heartening for us as an organization to see that level of commitment, but also maybe what like a strong ideological background to your beliefs can bring to your dedication to something. So that's exciting. We did well. Here's more map stuff. So this is just about turnout in general. So the turnout was very good in the areas that we focused in, which is how we were able to get our victory, making sure that these progressive neighborhoods and areas their voters would come out. We knew that we would have much better odds. So then this is based on more just like, this is just more general like neighborhood breakdown. And then this, the one on the left and the map on the right shows a precinct breakdown for the results of Prop M. You can find all these maps. I'll drop it in maybe the chat later because I'm not very good at like multitasking while doing this, but there is an organizer named Chris Arvin who has all these beautiful maps for all San Francisco elections going back many years for like every prop and candidate, and they're interesting to dive into if you guys want to do some research on your own time about past ballot measures and things like that. It was also when we were conceiving of the field plan, using these maps made by Chris Arvin was hugely helpful in deciding what areas we were going to target based on like past radical measures and how well they did in different areas. So check out Chris Arvin's maps. We covered a lot of ground. We covered all of District 1, all of District 4, all of District 5, 8, 9, 10, 11. And yeah, that just takes huge field game and people power. The total number of staff on the campaign was 4. It started out 1, the manager, then 2, the field director. And then another cool thing about doing this project through the DSA is we were able to hire 2 full-time staffers through the DSA to work on this. And just in terms of like compared to other ballot measures, like that's considered like a huge staff, like a 4-person staff on a ballot measure is kind of unheard of. So that combined with working with the org just really helped us have a really aggressive field plan. And yeah, like I said, we got 69% of the mission. The Tenderloin, which is newly redistricted. Also, yeah, speaking to the last Howie's points about redistricting, that recently happened in San Francisco, and the mayor was, there's a lot of shenanigans that went behind that, and like corruption is what I mean by shenanigans. Much darker, that went into how that redistricting ended up being, and feel like it was pretty intentional that the Tenderloin was redistricted into District 5. But ultimately we're excited for the organizing opportunities that will present for us now that Dean represents district or the Tenderloin. But yeah, we got 69% there, 53% the Excelsior, and 55.9 in the Bayview. And then the only working class area that we didn't win were Portola and Viz Valley, but both have been known to have some sort of like reactionary tendencies and like more of a shift in the last sort of 10 years with like the kinds of residents that live there. And maybe 10 to 20 years, but yeah, and we also won Chinatown, which was exciting. And these were some other areas. So that's cool. Then this is Pat's take, who's my campaign manager. And this is something that is like less, this is something that's just is speaking more to like the framing of Prop M rather than like more like DSA's political sort of stance on this. But I think strategically framing things as optional taxes is yeah, like very powerful in terms of like you can opt out of this. Like if you don't do X bad behavior, then you don't have to pay the tax, kind of thing. I think that framing for voters works pretty well. We worked really closely and actually at times had a joint field strategy plan with Prop O. We were using the same consultants, and one thing that Prop O, which was the funding City College with the parcel tax, and Prop H, which was the moving or consolidating elections from odd years to even years to increase voter turnout. Those 2 measures, in addition to Prop M, were all on DSA San Francisco's slate. So DSA SF has been reflecting a lot around the loss of Prop O. And since we worked really closely with Prop O throughout the campaign, we've been thinking a lot about their messaging strategy, all these things along the way. And one thing that some older members in our organization mentioned to us, even when we were talking about endorsing Prop O, was people calling it a regressive tax, because it's a parcel tax that affects any homeowner. But that's also, then there was some other younger DSA pushback being like, well, if you are a property owner, that's just, you're a property owner. And, there were some conflicts within that, which I think were interesting and is related to why Pat includes this take here. And I think also there are other things to say about wanting to fix administrative problems at City College. Like, I think there's a lot of history there that also can speak to why they might have lost, but I'm here to talk about Prop M, so we can maybe talk about that another time. And then, yeah, Pat thinks that there are 2 ways to win. You either sell out and you take big money, or you run to the left and you get a lot of grassroots support. I think we see this happen a lot, and I think that people who try to like go to the middle or split the difference there end up really struggling. So good to be bold, good to be radical. That's how you set yourself apart from the terrible two-party system that everyone's tired of. Also, yeah, we had a really, really strong volunteer force, like I had mentioned. We went out every weekend, some really successful, huge mega rallies. All this was very helpful, part of our success. Lots of coalition building. We really think that Faith in Action was an incredible coalition partner to have. They really helped us, like I said, in D11 and D10. I love this, bring the socialists and the religious people together. They both are fired by a true, compelling belief in what they're fighting for, and that shows in the level of dedication you get from the volunteers there. And we also worked with other groups. That was really helpful to bringing our message to a wider section of the working class. We got a lot of good media coverage. That's always important, especially because a lot of what you're trying to do in a ballot, like we saw in November 2022, that's just so long, is make sure people remember your measure, the key points on it, and just drive in the number. We also knew the YIMBYs and other naysayers would be really trying to attack our numbers and play some kind of numbers game with us. So we were trying to win that messaging war really early on of getting that number in people's head, no questions. So we started at 40,000 and then the census report brought it up to 61,000. So there was really no arguing with us about just how bad of a problem this is. This is some notes on our opposition. I think I'm running out of time. I don't know how much time I have
You have
left.
another minute,
Okay, thank you.
20 minutes.
Thank you. So yeah, there's lots of word dump here around some mistakes we think our opposition made. I'd say largely they just had so much money and didn't send out any mailers until the very, very end. And we don't know why they would do that. It seems like a huge waste, but they waited a long time. They couldn't decide on messaging because, yeah, there's some more in the weeds stuff here. But that was hugely helpful to us. Also, sometimes terrible big consultants will advise campaigns to spend money on dumb things like ads because they get a big cut out of that rather than mailers, which are more effective. And obviously, the clear thing about our opposition is that they have absolutely no on the ground people power, volunteer-led effort. That's clear. Yeah, just more details, but that's about it. Really happy to be here and answer your guys' questions later on. I'm gonna drop in that Chris Arvin stuff and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Gwen. I just want to add that Berkeley also had a Measure M, which is an empty homes tax, and it won by almost 65%. But it's interesting to me because almost 74,000 ballots were issued in Berkeley. So even though it had it beat the opposition, there wasn't as much enthusiasm, and I think it possibly has to do with the fact that Berkeley Measure M was put on the ballot by the city council after much opposition. That was a hard fight in the city council, but it's an interesting comparison, but both of them won. And I think that's reflective of people's need for housing. Okay, we're going to go to Aaron Revelace now, who is kind of Aaron actually did not plan to be a major speaker at this event, but we want him to say a few words. He's a Peace and Freedom Party executive board member, and he ran a really good campaign for school board in Los Angeles County. So Aaron, go ahead and say whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I was not expecting to talk, but hi everyone. It's cool being on a Zoom again with Howie. He had me on his show a couple weeks ago during my election, so thanks to him. But anyways, yeah, my name is Aaron Revelis. I'm a teacher with the Los Angeles Unified School District, and I ran in the district I live in, which is the neighboring school district, the Montebello Unified School District. And I wish I had a nice presentation, but I got 7,000 votes with $3,000 compared to my three opponents who won. They got between 9 to 12,000 votes with north of $30,000. So I used about 40 cents per vote, and they each used between $3 and $4 per vote. We had two volunteers, well, me and my girlfriend, about every day, and we had 3 to 5 weekly volunteers who would help us out Saturday and Sunday. I ran as an open socialist. I ran as a third party contendant. So, like a lot of something that Howie always says is in local elections, everyone knows who is in what party, even though you're not running as a party. So, everyone knew that the other people were all Democrats and I was the only non-Democrat. And so I really used that to my advantage. To the nonpartisan people, I would tell them, like, hey, I'm not Democrat, I'm not Republican, I don't have strings attached to me. I'm running for myself. I'm a teacher, and I'm running for what I want to see in schools because I'm in the trenches every day, and I would like to improve the conditions of teachers, but also the conditions of all employees and the conditions of all students. So I think that really helped out. And then with Republicans, it's very easy. I told them I'm the only non-Democrat in the race, and for a lot of Republicans, that's a way to get their vote. I learned a lot from the Green Socialist podcast. So like Howie's podcast and his Green Socialists, kind of like their local chapter training and how they do electoralism. So thanks to him for that. I was only able to canvass about 15% of the district when my opponents had, big union support, union volunteers. They had the Teachers Association volunteers, but were able to still just come right behind. I was able to get a lot of endorsements, like a recommendation from DSA, endorsements from Sunrise Movement. So, because I kind of learned from the Green Party podcast that if to really try to hit local organizations, because we can't maybe convince a statewide or a nationwide organization that usually goes with the Democrats, but we could really start on a local level to start building these coalitions and connections with progressive or more left-leaning organizations, so we can convince them to support a third party and independent socialist candidates. And that's really what I want to trying to do for this election cycle, was build connections at the third party level so we can eventually move on to building a powerful enough base that we can break away from that for other people, or a mass of people can break away from the Democrats or reach the unaffected, disillusioned voters and to come over to our side. Because a lot of what I was preaching about when I was running was I brought a lot of working class politics to the school board. So I talked to a lot of people about bringing graduate level education to working class communities. So a lot of the things I did was hey, I learned these stuff in graduate school and in my experience as a teacher. These are some things that every parent should know, so their child could be successful. So I was talking to people like that, I want to have not just classes for students, but classes for parents on how to make sure your child is successful, because these things shouldn't stay in academia. These things shouldn't stay only for people with a master's degree. This should be something that's common among our populace, and people really appreciated that message. I talked about how people's material conditions affect their education. So I talked about how lack of housing and food and economic security decreases students' achievements. So I talked about how we could work together with local city councilors to push for things like rent control and higher wages at our schools and government positions. So the people in our communities can stay in our communities, and we don't have a lot of flight away from our communities, which decreases the educational opportunities for students. And a lot of people resonated with that, because a lot of people I talked to, I didn't just talk about my race. I talked about how things were for them, and they were always talking about how rent is going up, how a lot of the local politicians, they come around and they get their vote and they send them 1,000 mailers. They don't even knock on their door, or they send other volunteers to them, but they're not in the communities talking to them. Even if you go to the city hall or the school board meetings, it's not a conversation. It's more like the constituents talking to the school board or city councilors. And then, so I also talked about how we need to get into the grassroots and not only knock on people's doors, but also have town halls so we can have conversations between the government and the working class. Because one thing as socialists we want to do is we want the working class to be the one who governs things, who the one that are taking direction. And we need to make steps towards that. And I think we really need to work on that on a local level, where we're bringing politics to the people and not expecting people to come to the politics. And I think that really resonated with a lot of people. And I like to not thank only for Peace and Freedom for helping me, but also the Green Party, because before I came around, the Green Party did a lot of work in my area in Los Angeles, and unfortunately, it's kind of fizzled. But I'm trying to pick up that mantle the Green Party left and bring back those old Green Party people that were there before, so we can work together. Because I was really inspired by the Left Unity Slate in California, and I really want to help work with other groups to make that Left Unity Slate larger, so we can start winning these local elections, so we can build up to be not only just a third party, but a second party. Because right now, the Republican Party in California is, it's becoming a regional party. They can only win in very certain areas. So it's leaving a vacuum that we can fill.
Okay, thanks, Aaron, and thanks for just stepping in there and giving us that information. Now it's everyone's turn to ask questions and make statements. You can find your chat and reactions icons at the bottom of your screen. If you participate in chat, you'll be talking to the group in chat. But if you want to actually speak, you should use the hand raising feature if you can. You can signify that you want to be on the stack by using the hand raising feature under reactions. Again, I will say we welcome your various political opinions. We do not allow any personal attacks or name calling. And I see, I'm going to call on several at a time and then go to the answers. I think we're going to start with 3-minute rounds and see how that goes. And that will include the questioners and also the answers. We have Michael Karsh. I think that's Matt Owen and Dave Kadlacek and CT. I usually do 3, but it depends on the nature of the comment or question. So we'll start with Michael and move on from there. Go ahead, Michael Karsh.
Yeah, is there any place where you post past Suds Snacks and Socialism episodes where I can find previous ones, or where you'll post this one?
Yeah, I'll answer that. I know that on the Peace and Freedom Party website, there are some of them. And will someone, maybe Dave Campbell can put that website in the chat for us. And some of them we haven't been able to post, but we are planning to do that in the future. Okay. That was a quick one. Okay, so now we go to Matt Owen.
Hello, everyone. My apologies for raising my hand early, but I thought there'd be a whole bunch of more people raising their hands. So here we are. And I am Peace and Freedom, campaigning for steps to take to get PFP and, to join the California independence movement and the Greens to support that movement. Okay, let me start off on a positive note, and that is the Left Unity Slate. Quite an achievement, and a lot of hard political work was done to get us to that point. What I'm wondering, it didn't happen this last time, but if Left Unity Slate is strong enough to knock the Republicans off the ballot, because in California, they are extremely weak. Okay, so what I would like to see, the same political work that has been done, and I am grateful to those who are doing it in the Greens, moving it to the left, is now being done by many people in the California National Party, the official party of California independence. You can see evidence of that on Red Star Report, Voices for the California Nation. Okay, so that same political work is being done there. So let me throw out a couple of ideas on how we cannot do the same things we've been doing and expect a different result, but do some different things. Okay, the first is building on the left unity slate in such a way as to get PFP into the California independence movement. And that is a modus vivendi between the Greens and the PFP, similar to that between Germany's CDU and CSU parties. They're the ones that managed to talk East Germans into accepting the West German Constitution. Okay, so if, you know, and let's face facts, PFP has never grown significantly beyond California. The Greens are international. PFP is part of international movements, but guess what? Still CNP, the Independence International. Okay, they have links to Scotland, Wales, Catalonia, the Basque Country, Quebec, and they would bring all those to the table, just as the Greens and the PFP bring what they've got to the left unity slate. So the idea is for PFP to concentrate on California and support the Greens as they concentrate on the US.
3 minutes. Please sum up.
Okay, so basically, what I foresee is a unified political party, which I've called the California Party of Peace and Liberation, being so strong it can knock the Republicans off the ballot. And all of a sudden, the Democrats won't be facing a right opposition. They'll be facing a left opposition with strong international ties. Let's see how that happens.
Okay, thank you, Matt. We're going to go to Dave Kavlicek now. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, I have a couple of comments that were in response to things Howie said, and then questions for each of the presenters. What Howie said about top 4 and top 5, keeping out third party and independent candidates. Top 2 does that, but top 4 and top 5 don't necessarily. I don't support them. Support top 4 and top 5 for sort of the reasons about atomizing voters and doing away with parties. But if you look at Alaska in last year's election, which did use top 4, there were several independent and third-party candidates who made it to the general election under that, and you could expect that to happen pretty much anywhere where there's a top 4 or top 5 system. Also, he mentioned Ukraine coming up with the Republican peace candidates. I noticed that covert action information bulletin sort of reborn web presence sends out lots of stuff that I get, and they had something in there that called the America First Committee of the 1930s the largest peace movement in American history. You know, that is Lindbergh's sort of semi-pro-Nazi group. I kind of think that Republican peace candidates would be peace candidates in the sense that the America First Committee was a peace movement. My question for Howie is, there's a lot of stuff about the congressional election in New York being the biggest thing that turned things to the Republicans. Could you comment on what happened with the congressional elections in New York State? For Gwen, my question is that the empty homes tax wasn't really was a progressive ballot measure, but it wasn't really a socialist ballot measure. What about a more explicitly socialist ballot measure, if related to housing, something to promote taking housing completely out of the market? And for Aaron, my question is, what do you think would have happened if you had more resources? Could you have won, say, if you had a third of what the opponents had instead of a tenth of what they had? That's it.
Okay, thanks. So since we have a question for each candidate, I'm going to go to the answers from those from panelists. And then, so CT, I'm going to call on you after we have some responses. I'll start with Gwen this time, if that's okay with you, Gwen.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think there's a hard thing a lot of the time with the DSA's work electorally about what we believe is truly socialist versus calculations that we make around what we think is like politically possible, and those two things don't always align. And also members have different opinions over whether we should even only be trying to do things that we think are like immediately politically possible in our electoral struggles that we take on. But I think a lot of members are also really motivated to get resources for affordable housing. So in like one day we would like to execute like the 2021 Berlin, housing referendum here in San Francisco, where we can just seize all the unused, corporate housing, but that is not probably that possible through the ballot here anytime in the near future or the immediate future. But that is why we built in as a part of this program the funding. Like we knew that no matter what, it would generate a lot of money, this tax, because we know there are going to be many people that just choose to pay the tax because they can afford to, because they're rich. That's why they have all these empty homes in the first place. But we knew that the money that we generated from the tax would minimally be $38 million a year, and then we could use that money to go towards more what you're talking about, like a more socialist answer to a housing question, removing housing off the market through social housing, through the affordable or like through the housing acquisition program. So part of the money will be going towards that. Yeah, like, do I want to run a ballot measure where we just seize all the empty units in San Francisco? Yes. Would that ever win in San Francisco? No. So that's just my personal take on the matter.
Thanks, Gwen. So Aaron, do you want to tell us how much money you would need to win your election? And I have my own ideas about that.
Yeah. Honestly, I think if I had, maybe like, double the money I had. Which,
I think, oh, sorry, Aaron.
it sounds, what the,
I think your internet connection is,
I think I froze.
yeah.
Yeah, is it working now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, it's because we're very, we're running on fumes, and one thing I keep mentioning the Green Party podcast, but one thing I think we really need to switch towards is having more of us and having more due-paying members, so we can have a little kickstart of our campaign funds, so we can not only also use that to fundraise, but also train fundraisers within our third parties, so we can get that, and also maybe get that funding from the other groups we establish relationships with. So I think that's one way we can start, raising a little bit more money. But I think, we're never gonna outraise other people. We need like a strong, dedicated base of volunteers who are going to people's homes and knocking on their doors, always be community, so people know who we are, and we're always there when the Democrats and Republicans are not present. We'll be present in the communities, and people, they take notice of that over time.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I want to add a little bit to that, because some of you may know that I was elected to the Berkeley Rent Board in 1994, which was a long time ago, but we knocked on just about every door especially in the neighborhoods with a lot of tenants to turn out the vote. And so even with a lot less money, we were able to finally turn the rent board around back to pro-tenant commissioners. But one thing that in school board races, which I find distressing, and Aaron touched on, is that the teachers union just automatically endorses the Democratic Party candidates. And as a teachers union member who ran for different offices, it was just incredible to me that they never even considered a teacher union member as a candidate for office when they had their establishment Democrats that they, and even sometimes Republicans that they support. So that's something we have to fight about in the unions. Okay, so Howie, it's your turn.
Okay, I'm gonna focus on Dave's question about what happened in New York. But one thing that happened in New York is when I ran for governor in 2014, we got 6 locals of the teachers union to endorse us in defiance of the state union. In fact, we had teachers slip us the list of all the union local presidents. And Brian Jones, who was an education advocate, my running mate for lieutenant governor, and I sent him a letter. And after the election, we got letters from the lawyers of the state teachers union demanding that we tell them who gave us that list or else. And we told them to F off, and they didn't do anything. But then in 2018, same thing, Cuomo, the education issue wasn't as high, but I went to the Buffalo Teachers Federation, which had endorsed me before. I was the only candidate who went for an endorsement. I got the interview. Their political committee recommended to the executive committee they take no endorsement. Went to the membership, and the membership voted, no, we won't endorse Howie. So I'm just saying, don't give up on the unions, fight. As far as what happened in New York, well, the Democrats, first they overplayed their hand with extreme gerrymandering. Got thrown out of court. I think we have 27 congressional districts. They had it so only 2 were majority Republican. It was extreme. They got thrown out. Some judge from New Jersey wrote the districts. So about 5 of them were semi-competitive. And the Republicans won all of them. In my district by less than 0.5%, but they won. And I think the reason is the Democrats led by Governor Hochul echoed the Republicans on crime, and she went running over to Eric Adams in New York, a former cop who got elected mayor, COVID public health measures. And then on immigration, again, running over to Eric Adams and whining about the crisis that, the governors of Texas and Florida were creating because they were busing immigrants to New York. So the voter turnout was low, and it was the worst vote for the Democrats in the governor's race they've had in 2 decades. And I think that filtered down to the congressional races, that same messaging, which, a lot of Democrats didn't come out and vote because they said, why? You sound like Republicans. And then in the other thing is that New York changed its election law. This is unique to New York, made it much more difficult to get on a ballot. They doubled the frequency you have to qualify from every 4 years for governor to every 2 years for president and governor. They more than tripled the number of votes you need to stay on the ballot. So we lost ballot access in 2020. Instead of 50,000, we needed 175,000. And then they tripled the number of signatures you need to get in 42 days from 15,000 to 45. That time limit makes that probably the most difficult petition in the country. And they made other changes. I won't go into the details. But as a result, for the first time since 1946, and the only other time since 1891 when the state started issuing official ballots, there was only Democrats and Republicans on the ballot for governor, attorney general, and comptroller, which meant the left had no voice in this election. And that enabled the Democrats to chase the Republicans to the right. And then people that wanted to do a protest vote because they weren't happy with Hochul, who might have voted for the Greens or the Libertarians, they voted for the Republicans as a protest. So I think all those factors played into the fact that we lost in New York 5 seats the Democrats could have and should have won for the House.
Okay, thanks, Howie. So now I'm ready to look at the stack again. And so far I only see CT Weber. If you want, which is fine, CT, you're next. If anyone else wants to be on the stack, please raise your hand. But go ahead, CT, it's your turn.
Okay, guess I want to start with a couple comments that were made about ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is basically when you get down to it, people keep getting eliminated. If you're in a single member district or an executive position like governor or something, eventually you're going to get down to the the Democrat and the Republican again, or two Democrats or two Republicans, depending on the state. It's going to be rare occasions where ranked choice voting will end up with alternative parties winning. They will possibly do better on the first round, but so I think what Howie said is very important, especially in legislative races, and that is that if you're going to go supporting ranked choice voting, you want multi-member districts so that you can have proportional representation. I do want to say, though, that it's unfortunate that in the United States, unlike most places that are around the world, English-speaking countries seem to like individualism. And so therefore, ranked choice voting is a type of individualism where you're voting for the individual as opposed to an organization or a party or a group. That's why I personally prefer the list system. You know, if Peace and Freedom Party gets 10% of the vote, they get 10% of the seats. And it's a lot simpler than ranked choice voting also. The other thing I wanted to talk on, the left unity slate, I do like the idea of growing that. On the other hand, I think we ought to think of a way how we can possibly rank in the various people. There were people who, despite Green Party endorsing 4 Peace and Freedom Party candidates, that they ran candidates against us. And so that was confusing to a lot of people because a lot of people don't read the voters information guide, which says that the Green Party supports these 9 candidates and the Peace and Freedom Party supports these 9 candidates. So we have to somehow figure out a way to shore up that support if it's going to continue. And I think the last thing is just it's not really a large difference with Howie on Ukraine, because I do support, or let me reword that. I criticize Russia for the invasion because even though it may have been necessary, I think the way they went about it was really really bad. Also, it's sort of like the old argument between historians is who causes the war? Is it the one that fires the first shot, or is it the one that causes the first shot to be fired? Well, in this day and age, the UN has ruled that it's the one who fires the first shot. So Russia is definitely in the wrong there. On the other hand, this has been going on, since Germany was unified, and they said NATO's not going to expand any more to the east, which was probably a lie to begin with, but definitely something that didn't stop. It expanded from a 12-member defensive organization to a 30-member offensive organization, and there's plenty of examples of their aggressiveness up to the border of Russia.
Time's up, please wrap up. Time's up, please wrap up. 3 minutes is up, more than up. Please wrap up.
Okay, then I'd just like to say that I heard Putin's speech, and he was misquoted when he said he wanted to take all of Ukraine. He said that, historically we had ties, but those are in the past, and we're not going down that path anymore. We're 2 separate countries. So those other things are just outright lies about him wanting to conquer the whole country. Anyway, that's it for now.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, CT. It's Stan Wood's turn. Stan, you're muted.
Yeah, I know. I had to unmute. First, I want to say that thanks to Gwen for the very detailed report over the elections in San Francisco. I mean, this is the campaign around housing in San Francisco is exactly how leftists can work with liberals. I'm talking about individual rank and file Democrats. I'm not talking about politicians, to get progressive measures done, get it through. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. And I first met Gwen during the campaign to stop the recall of Chesa Boudin. And there was so much reactionary nonsense out about that. We weren't able to succeed in that, but still, it was a hard effort. My question for Howie Hawkins also deals with the Ukraine. You said there might be Republican peace candidates implying, as the Democrats do, that the only people that oppose the war are alt-rightists. You didn't say that, but you implied that. And nothing could be further than the truth. Recently, there was a couple dozen former and retired members of International Longshore and Warehouse Union, including myself. I was in the warehouse division, but primarily members of the Longshore division, who signed a letter calling for international dock workers to refuse to handle cargo arms shipments to the Ukraine. And you were part of a counter letter that strongly opposed that, which is your right, of course. But I just want to make it clear that many people on the left oppose the war and the just unlimited amount of military aid. And also the military aid goes to the police, the intelligence, the secret police, and so on and so forth. And indirectly helps the right-wing Catholic nationalist government in Poland, among other things. And so I just want to make it clear, and I wonder what you'd like to comment on that. Are you denying? As a matter of fact, I think you're a minority within the Green Party on the issue of the Ukraine. So please retract this implication that only Republicans oppose the war. I would not support any phony so-called Freedom Caucus peace candidates, but I would support candidates like the left unity slate who oppose the war from the left. And I oppose the Russian invasion. I oppose the expansion of NATO. Matter of fact, I would like to see NATO dissolved. And also, I want the situation to be dialed back. It's a very dangerous situation. I don't support either side in the sense of wanting one side to achieve military victory over the other. I would like to see serious negotiations, starting with a ceasefire and leading to serious negotiations before we lead to World War III. I was in elementary school during the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I remember even in my small industrial city of Charleston, West Virginia, schools were let out at noon, and we were told to go home and be with our families as the Soviet ships were approaching the US naval blockade. Fortunately, the Soviets blinked. We didn't get to the point of nuclear war, but I don't want this to occur now. So once again, my question to Howie Hawkins, are you denying that many people on the left, including people in your own party, also oppose the unlending military aid to the Ukraine and want to see this end? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Stan. So before we put Howie on the spot, I'm going to call on Jean Rule, and then we'll go to the panelists.
Okay, well, thank you so much for organizing this, and I really appreciate the discussion, particularly about electoral politics locally. I know I really appreciate what the Alameda County Greens have always done with their voter guide that really provides information for us. But the issue I want to raise is, again, this idea that there are two imperialisms in the world, US imperialism and usually Chinese imperialism. And I think that's just a misreading of the current political situation. We have one imperialism. That's US imperialism that has military bases in almost every country around the world. 600 of them, has waged wars almost every year, one place or another around the world. So that's the real imperialism that we need to oppose. China, on the other hand, is a revolutionary socialist communist country that has not waged any wars except for that unfortunate disagreement with Vietnam in the 70s. And it doesn't have military bases, except it has the Belt and Road initiative with, not only throughout Asia, but I think 20 countries in Latin America have signed on to this thing. So that I think overwhelmingly, China can't be considered a revolutionary, imperialist country. It's not part of the problem. It's part of the solution, in my view. And I know that many people will disagree with that, but again, that's my view. And I just wanted to get that forward and let Howie respond if he cares to.
Okay, let's give Howie a little extra time, like 5 minutes for if he needs it. Go ahead, Howie.
Well, first to CT's comments on ranked choice voting. I agree with them. I think going with ranked choice voting, including proportional ranked choice voting, is an accommodation to the individualism of our political culture, because we don't have membership parties. We don't have parties where you have to agree with the political program, maybe pay dues, then you get to decide on what your program's going to be, your activities, and your candidates. The way you get in a party in this country is you tell the state, I want to vote in their primary. Whether you do it as registration in closed primary states, or just go to the polling place and say, I'm gonna vote Democrat today, or Republican, or Peace and Freedom, or Green. So anybody with any politics can join any party. That's where we're at. And I think to advance proportional representation, our best bet at this time is to go with proportional ranked choice voting. But that's also a reason to set up on the left mass membership parties. The Socialist Party was doing that even as the primary system was being introduced, and they maintained it until they became very small and really couldn't withstand or play a big factor. So that's one point. On Ukraine, look, we can oppose NATO expansion and Russia's invasion. There's no reason why we can't. And as far as Russia's original intentions, I mean, the battle plans and the orders of the Russian military units invading Ukraine have revealed that they intended to take over the whole country, to murder Zelensky and his wife and children and install a puppet. The New York Times had a long multimedia piece that documented that a few weeks ago. And these are battle plans and orders captured in the Kyiv region, also in Zaporizhia. And so I think that's clear. And, you can, man, if you listen to what is said on Russian state media, that's certainly what they're talking about there. And I don't deny that there are people on the left that oppose sending military aid to Ukraine. I'm just saying the Republicans got a lot more influence. They're going to make it an issue in 2024. And yeah, maybe the conservative government of Poland is benefiting in some way, but I can tell you that the new left party, Razem in Poland, is completely with arming the Ukrainians. They are very adamant about that, and they're a left-wing socialist party. In the Green Party, yeah, it's split pretty much down the middle. The National Committee voted on a resolution to cut off arms to Ukraine, end sanctions on Russia, and call vaguely for negotiations back in October by a vote of 44 to 48 with 8 abstentions. And that debate is continuing. So yeah, I know that there are people on the left that have a different position from me. But my question is, if you really support Ukrainian self-determination and oppose Russia's invasion, what do you think is going to happen if we cut off arms? The country will be broke and disarmed, and Russia will roll right over them. That's not supporting their right to national self-determination. I don't agree that there's just one imperialism in the world. There are multiple imperialisms. All these countries, and I would include China, are fundamentally capitalist, which creates an expansionist dynamic and competition with other countries. And you can look around the world and see it. Russia, not only in Ukraine, but Syria, Georgia, they got Wagner people supporting the military junta in Sudan, in the Central African Republic and in other African countries, Mali. They're supporting the Myanmar military dictatorship. So they're trying to exert influence in their interests around the world. China, just look at what happened to Hong Kong. They smashed what was left of democracy, what those candidates in the half of the council there could vote in open elections or run in open elections. They all got arrested. The trade unions were smashed. The independent media smashed. That's expansion, and it's imperialism. Turkey, in Syria, they're intervening in Libya. They're throwing their weight around. It's like Erdogan wants to be the new leader of a new Ottoman Empire, Iran. They're in Iraq, they're in Syria, they're in Lebanon. So their expansion is at least exerting their influence around the world. So I say we got to oppose all those imperialisms. And, people talk about a multipolar world and somehow these other capitalist states are going to check US imperialism. No, we need really a global socialist revolution to end these capitalisms and the imperialisms that issue from them. And that's why we should be in solidarity in the case of Ukraine with the masses of Ukrainians, including, their working class organizations among the trade unions and the socialists and anarchists and feminists and environmentalists.
Okay, so we haven't heard from our other panelists. Gwen, do you want to say anything at this point in response to the questions or comments?
I feel like I didn't hear one that was like particularly directed about Prop M. Yeah, I feel like I tend to lean a little bit more. I don't know if people want to know this, like more towards what Stan was saying. I don't know. I think internationalism is extremely important, but I don't want any money going to any other country to help kill anyone on any side when we could use that money here in America for helping house everyone or do a million other things that would be better. That's my take.
Okay, thanks. How about you, Aaron? Do you want to make a comment at this point?
Yes. Can you quickly remind me the question?
Well, I think there was there was something about ranked choice voting and proportional representation a long time ago. And then there was a few comments about Ukraine and Russia and that whole conflict.
Yeah, I think for ranked choice voting and proportional representation, I think these are all like nice in theory, but I mean, it's an incredible hurdle to come across until we get enough people actually elected in our local and state legislatures, because the Democrats aren't going to do it for us. So we need to work with what we have now to eventually get these things. And that's where I'm at this point, because whenever people start talking about, oh, top two is not fair, or oh, we really need ranked choice voting, or oh, we won't be viable until we have ranked choice voting. Well, it's like we won't get those things until we make ourselves become viable first. So let's build a strategy for what we can do now, instead of hoping one day the Democrats are going to give us ranked choice, or they'll give us, proportional, because they're just not. And with the other stuff, the international conflict, that, I understand why some people agree one way or the other. I personally have one side, but, running in local campaigns and, dealing with stuff that's very local to me, honestly, I think I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings or be kind of mean, but, to be upfront, I think arguing about that stuff amongst us right now is pretty useless, until we win elections where we're actually making decisions about that stuff. I think we should have those conversations then, or I think we should really focus on ourselves in the United States, what we can affect. How can we improve the conditions of people here now, in Los Angeles, in Berkeley, in New York, before we start worrying about other stuff? Because, the thing is, we're the ones that live in the United States. It's up to us to stop our country from sending, money elsewhere, to stop doing these coups that are creating these difficult situations that, oh, now we need to pick sides. But ultimately, if we can make the United States become neutral, if we can make the United States stop sending millions of dollars to, this side that we don't like, or this other side that we don't like less, we'll be able to more clearly see what's going on in the world if we don't have, $1 billion media industry muddying the water. So I think that's something that we need to focus on, is focus on ourselves first, and our local and our state-wide issues first, so we can actually impact it, instead of arguing over stuff that we have no control over or power to control.
Okay, are there anyone else who wishes to be on the stack? I'm going to call on myself because I've just been reacting to what's going on in Congress and also thinking about the issue of war and peace. And I think they're related. I think it's, it's kind of fun to watch the Republicans self-destruct in Congress, although they've finally come to some resolution. But it's also, to me, kind of demoralizing because we should be able to take advantage of this. We see the two major political parties disintegrating before our very eyes. And in the battle between socialism and barbarism seems to be way in the forefront. And we do not, we really need, despite all the obstacles of unfair voting systems and lack of media coverage, we should be able to build the left and to build the left opposition way more than we've been able to. And I think one of the problems is our kind of fighting over what Aaron's, I think is, well, let me get this straight. I think it's unfortunate that we're fighting over the issues of war and peace, but I think we also need to hold peace as a general principle. I mean, in the Russian Revolution, the slogan was peace, land, and bread. And some of the members of the German Social Democratic Party, before the Social Democrats split off and endorsed World War I, was no war but the class war. And as far as I can tell, this is what we're looking at between the Ukraine and Russia. Howie may disagree, but I do not see it as a class war. I sympathize with the Ukrainians who are attacked, but ultimately the Ukraine is a pawn between the ambitions for world domination between the United States and the former Soviet Union. I don't think the current Russian state is at all a communist state or a socialist state, or has any remnants of that anymore. But what they do retain is the post-World War II ambitions of Stalin to dominate Europe, and that's unfortunate. But it's become a war between U.S., NATO, and Russia, and that's an unfortunate thing. It's not just that the money for the military that could be used for better things in this country, but just the idea of military buildup. That's not the way to end a war. You don't end a war by building up the military. You only end up the war by shutting down the war machine. And now I will call on Arlene. Arlene, it's your turn.
Ariane?
Ariane, I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, that's okay. It's not
I
important.
look like,
My name is not important. I really appreciate this conversation and meeting. I work on Saturdays, so I missed the lecture, and I hope it's posted somewhere. And I do hope that when you send out emails in the future that you follow them up with the recordings to the people who signed up, because people often are hoping for that. What you're doing is so important. I just want to make a short addition to what has been said about the war in Ukraine. I'm Ukrainian Russian American. I don't mean to offend anyone. I just want to say a few things how I see it after thinking and studying it for quite a bit, and just feeling a strong pull, even somatically, in relationship to these warring parties. I think it's really important to see what's being done to the American people, that this is being promoted as a just war. And it's actually a choreographed war in which the forces that are promoting war and that are running our government. When you say the US, that's not precise enough. I want to be very precise about who's ruling both the Democratic and Republican Party. And those are a few powerful families who are tied up from the beginning for hundreds of years, both with now more recently the energy systems, the fossil fuel companies, and the great wealth that's associated with these powerful families and corporations. They're pulling the strings of our presidents and of the future of our planet. They're willing, not what we think, when there were millions of people protesting in the streets in both England and the US against the war in Iraq, which was again strategized. They had killed Saddam Hussein before the official bombing, and Bob Woodward wrote about that in Plan of Attack. But Americans came to think that that war was promoted because we needed to maintain our lifestyle. We're all implicated and entangled in that because our military does run on oil. And so we are going to go to war over oil. And people had half the analysis. The other half is that the fossil fuel companies run our military and run our government. And our whole life, our future is threatened by that. It's not only a choice between are we going to address social justice issues and the environmental emergency, or are we going to be deviated by this war? It's the fact that this system uses such subterfuge that even progressives in America are promoting war, even though they're pacifists for the most part, because they have taken over ABC, CBS, MSNBC, Facebook. You can't even have a analytical and restrained discussion about that because it pulls at so many people's heartstrings. It does seem like it's a just war. Certainly the Ukrainians should be able to defend themselves, and that goes very, very deep for all of us, both somatically and morally. But what we're not seeing is what is actually at stake here, that they could lead us into a nuclear war, that all the nuclear power plants are continuously leaking, and that time is running out to address global heating and climate disruption, and that of the 100 million refugees, almost all of them have been touched by American militarism or climate disruption. So we need to talk about this openly, about the role of the fossil fuel companies and how it didn't stop and did not start at COP27 or COP15. They are ruling our government, and it's not the opposite. Now, the other thing that's of interest here is that, where the banking families and the banking interests are involved, because certainly they're willing to assassinate a president that opposes them.
3 minutes is up. Please wrap up.
That just to end, that nations all over the world are paying for oil and gas in American dollars, and so all of these entanglements are there, and we have to be big enough to say degrowth. It's not a four-letter word, and that we need to be very specific about the role of fossil fuel companies. All of us are marionettes in this.
Okay, thank you, Ariane. Okay, do we have any more questions or comments from the floor? Okay, so we have some time. Can we combine the answers to the last thing with the closing remarks and give each speaker a few extra minutes, like 7 or something to end? I think we have enough time for that by my calculations. So if you need, so between
No, we don't. We got 14 minutes till 4:30.
Oh, we do. Okay, so we'll just go with the 5-minute thing and go over a little bit. Okay, go ahead, How. Let's have I have to reverse it. Let's give Gwen 5 minutes. Go ahead, Gwen.
Hi, sorry, I had to turn my camera off. I moved to another portion of my house that does not have as good of internet, so I don't want to have any freezes happen. But yeah, I don't think I'll be using my full 5 minutes. I didn't, sorry, I don't have something super prepared for a wrap up, but I think just reiterating like some of the major points in terms of a post 2022 analysis with a focus on Prop M, what that victory meant, and also like larger battles in San Francisco. I think we're currently in a really reactionary period of politics here in San Francisco. I think a lot of that can be seen in like the recall of Chesa, our progressive DA, and then the subsequent just sort of like talking points coming out of the mayor's office and the police department around crime, the crime narratives that are being spun here in San Francisco, a real war on drugs kind of attitude and war on poverty. It's tough times to organize within that climate. And we saw 3 seats on the board that used to be held by progressive candidates lost, or no, two lost and 1 just like stayed bad. But I think within all of that, Prop M is like a really shining victory. I think that my biggest takeaway from working on the whole thing was just the power of people power, which is a line that gets used a lot and can feel maybe corny sometimes, but I think was very overwhelming to me on a campaign that averaged 35 volunteers a week for a cause that really fired people up. We had artists and activists and kids and plays writing schools about Prop M. We had people throwing concerts for Prop M. We had punks, we had rappers. We really were able to draw a really wide net of like true San Franciscans into the cause. I'm also, I don't know, I feel like I can say that. Yeah, and I think it's just, we have to keep the pressure on and keep as socialists, like really keep our ear to the pulse of what is important to people, both locally and nationally. And I think I really agreed with, I think, Aaron's better points that he followed up after my response to like, I don't know what I think about Ukraine. And I think, again, like, I'm just sort of saying this to echo that. It's like, I don't think those are the topics that get young leftists or working class people or disillusioned people or non-voters really fired up, honestly. I think they care a lot about changing the material conditions directly around them in their cities and communities. And I think we can do that through the ballot and not through the ballot. And that's exciting. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Gwen. I want to apologize. I totally miscalculated the time. So Aaron, do you want us to speak for a couple minutes?
Yes. So for closing comments, I think things are really looking up for us on the independent left. We see fractures in the Democratic Party and DSA, where a lot of people want to move leftward. A lot of people want to move independent. They're looking for other options, and people are seeing through like people just calling themselves progressives, or in Los Angeles the new buzzword is abolitionist. And these people, they're really being seen through, because they're just being seen as the outsiders of the Democratic Party that are firmly, once they win, they're becoming incorporated. And I think people in like regular working class people are seeing through that. And when they see like a viable, third party option, they go for it. And I think, us, working together and building our relationships between all of our different organizations is, it's going to be what's going to end up becoming successful and end up, hopefully building something more. Because, like what other people have said before, new younger people getting into politics, the working class, they don't care about like our different outlooks on, a lot of the things that we like to argue about, that are important. But, a lot of people, at the end of the day, they care about, I don't want to say it's like selfish, but it kind of is, because like if we can't take care of ourselves, you know, if I can't pay rent, if I can't, you know, put food on the table, that's what I'm going to worry about the most is, you know, my material conditions. And I think we need to focus on that, you know, the bread and butter issues about what's going on in our local communities, and that's the path forward. And you know, I'd like to thank everyone who's doing like hard work on that stuff. Like in my city, you know, DSA, we passed a tax on all property. DSA helped pass a tax on property that's $4 million or more, any property that's going to go to services to help houseless people and seniors on limited incomes. And the Green Party, because they helped me out, you know, they put me on their media. Howie put me on their media. You know, I had a lot of the other teachers volunteering for me. 4 out of the 5 teachers that helped volunteer with me, you know, they were Greens. So I think, you know, we keep working together, we'll eventually start winning. And I think the lesson from the 2022 election is that 2024, if we start getting ready now, we could definitely pick some seats up, even if it's just, you know, at the local level.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. And now Howie, you've got your closing remarks.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me say a few more things about Ukraine. I think the pacifist position of no arms to nobody, nowhere, no time is just a privileged position. I mean, the Ukrainians certainly can't afford that when they're being invaded and where they're occupied and being put through filtration camps. And if they're not loyal to Russia, imprisoned, tortured, raped, sometimes executed, or forcibly removed to Russia, including thousands of children. And to say you can't defend yourself, we got to make a distinction between the violence of an aggressor and armed self-defense. And the Ukrainians should have that right, and they should be able to get their arms from wherever they can get them. I mean, were the US imperialists wrong to aid the Soviet Union and the Vietnamese communists and the Chinese communists against Hitler in the case of the Soviet Union and the Japanese invaders in the case of China and Vietnam? You got to look at each case by its own merits and subject it to its own class analysis. I think somebody said that there was a coup in Ukraine that started all this. I mean, the Ukrainians, including the left, scoff at that. There was a movement, there was a revolution. Why is the left suddenly afraid of revolutions? Hundreds of thousands demonstrating in the public squares, the Maidan and Kyiv and around the country. And Yanukovych finally fled to Russia. So the parliament elected an interim president, and they had elections within a few months. And then they had another election that elected Zelensky. But there's this Russian line that a lot of people here apparently accept, that Zelensky is just a puppet, and the Ukrainians have no vote in all this. But of course they do, because everybody thought, in fact, the Americans thought they were going to get wiped out at the beginning. They offered Zelensky a ride. He said, no, I need ammunition. And then they beat the Russians in the Kyiv region. And then the arms started flowing. And, you know, from a military point of view, they still need tanks, longer range missiles, military, you know, fighter jets. They're not getting that from the West. So I think you got to look at each case on its own. And one of those cases where the people deserve arms to defend themselves and get those arms from wherever they can is Ukraine. So going back to the topic of, you know, where the socialist left goes from now, besides fighting over the question of Ukraine, which I think we're going to do. I would say, I think Aaron said, you know, ranked choice voting is not coming. We're winning, as I said earlier. You know, we're going from 24 jurisdictions to over 100, and including proportional ranked choice voting. In that case, where there's been racial exclusion from city councils, Asians in Albany, California, Mexican Americans in Palm Desert, California, now Ojai, California, African Americans in East Point, Michigan, and all people of color in Portland, Oregon. All those, sometimes under the threat or the actual civil rights lawsuits, they moved to proportional ranked choice voting from either at-large or district-based, you know, winner-take-all plurality elections. So I'm just saying this is a movement that is gaining momentum, and we can win at every level on that one. I think it's going to be from below, first local and then state and then federal. I'd reemphasize, as somebody was commenting in the chat, that we can run in those non-competitive districts and dissipate the spoiler problem by educating people that it's not a question in this district, and then becoming, in a lot of cases, a second party and setting the debate. And then the last thing I would say is, I ran for president, not because I thought I'd be president or because I thought that was the best way to build the Green Party. It was part of what we had to do to get ballot lines and, be present in front of people the extent we could. But the way we're going to build an independent socialist left is from the bottom up, through street politics and electoral politics, where we're involved with our communities on an ongoing basis. So I would just emphasize that the left should be running a lot more independent left candidates at the local level. And that's the foundation for building a base to get into state legislatures and then the House, and then change in this country.
Okay, thanks to Howie and to all of the panelists, to Gwen and to Aaron also, and all of you wonderful participants. Thank you for participating in this forum. The forums take place on the first Saturday of most months. Please join us again on February 4th for Haiti, past, present, and future. We may be having this forum in person at the Starry Plow, our original place where we had our forums, but we also want to continue having the online component. So we're working on doing this as a hybrid event. We're not sure whether or not we can, we've figured that out yet. So we'll let you know where this, it will for sure be online and possibly also at the Starry Plow. You can sign up to get forum announcements by requesting to do so in the chat, or better yet, by emailing us at info@sudssnackssocialism.org. That address will be posted in the chat. There was an inquiry about the recorded sessions. Some of those are on the Peace and Freedom Party website. And if you request the recording, we can probably send it to you. That's that. Thank you very much for participating, and hopefully we'll see you on February 4th.